Shalom, everyone. We're gathered today on the 16th day of the second month as we comprehend our Creator's calendar. It is 2 days past second Passover, which is the day that was appointed for keeping the Pesach for everyone who was not able due to uncleanness or being away uh, to keep the Passover when they could not do it in the land at the time. This was to ensure in a larger scheme of things, in its immediate sense, it was to allow those that were either unclean or away, as it mentioned, to keep the Pesach and not be attributed or accounted it as a sin. In a larger context, the whole point of his appointing these feasts was to appoint and establish and foretelling when he was going to die and to have witnesses there to see it, where all the men of the people were required to be there at that time. So everyone who was not able to make it then would be able to come a month later at the 14th day of the second month, which was 2 days ago, and hear about the news of his coming, death, and resurrection. So it would be to ensure that the people at the time would be able to receive the good news. To the Yahudi first, which remember the Yahudi is not the one who is so in the flesh, but the one who is so spiritually. And Yahudah means he who confesses, acknowledges, and praises Yahuwah, as opposed to the other people who do not, right? And that's all in regard to the meanings of names and the parables within the narrative of the stories. So when you look at the 12 tribes collectively, Yahudah are those that praise, confess, and acknowledge Yahuwah. Louis are those joined unto him. Shimon are those who hear, believe, and do, right? Each one of them have their own type, if you will. Those are the most easily seen in the micro and macro scale because throughout the world, the sons of Louis and the sons of Shimon were to be spread throughout the tribes and not have an inheritance of their own. Louis was literally throughout all 12 tribes, throughout the kingdom. But if you look into the narratives, Shimon was only contained within the tribe of Yahudah itself. So, as a picture in parable form, those who hear, believe, and do are exclusively of those of the Yahudim, those who confess, acknowledge, and praise Yahuwah, He who is, right? Excuse me. So, ob willing, that will help other people start to comprehend a little bit of how the narratives work in parable form in relation to the stories that we can read about the tribes, especially in the times of the judges, kings, and chronicles and that nature. Also, when you look at the testaments of the 12 patriarchs, which we have already done, you can see some of what the patriarchs walk out that will be echoed in their children. But either way, that was 2 days ago. Today is the 16th as we comprehend it, like I just mentioned. And on the Gregorian calendar, it is the 26th of April, 2025, as we comprehend it. And we are on day 21 of counting the Omar, which is from the Abiv barley of first fruits on the 26th of the first month, when Yahushua was the first fruits of the resurrection and appeared to our Father in the Shamayim. And in that evening, it is recorded in Scripture that he appeared to all 12, including Toma, who he allowed to perceive by touching the wounds in his hands and side, um, which our sister Cindy was just mentioning something interesting about. I cannot recall completely, but I know it's commonly thought that he's considered doubting Thomas, and I believe our brother Jackson Snyder was just mentioning how there is another way of looking at that, how he was able to be a confirming witness to the truth by personally being able to take hold of what his hands had handled and what he had seen and heard of the word of life, just as it mentions in the book of Yahukanot. I might be misconstruing that a little, so please correct me if I'm wrong and we can put that in there. But in the meantime, we left off with our reading of Yobelim in chapter 43. So we're coming into 44, where Jacob, now named Yisrael, remember, Jacob is he who it catches at the hill, right? He who has coming what he deserves immediately, right? Immediate recompense for his deeds, if you will, is the meaning of Jacob. They also have it translated as surplanter, where he supplanted Edom in the preferential birthright and the covenant blessings. But his name was changed from Jacob, which is a type of the believer at this time, if you think about it. The third age of believers, where we're outside of the land. We've talked about those things before. But as he comes into Mitzrayim or Egypt, his name is changed for the second time to Yisrael, or he who strives with Min and El and overcomes, or it means a prince of El, or the upright of El. It's all of these meanings in it. So now he's returning to, or he's going down into Mitzrayim. This might be like an inversion, or this is foretelling the things of what was going to come with his children that later on did. It was literally the fulfillment of what their forefather Abraham walked out in his person in a larger scale, right? It was an echo and then the fulfillment of that. But here we go. This is chapter 44. It says, And Yisrael took his journey from Haran, from his house on the Chodesh, or new month of the third month. And he went on the way of the well of the oath, and he offered a sacrifice to Yahuwah Elohim of his father Yitzchak on the 7th of this month. And Jacob remembered the dream that he had seen at Bethel. And he feared to go down into Egypt, or Mitzrayim. And while he was thinking of sending word to Yahusuf to come to him, and that he would not go down, he remained there 7 days. So from the 7th to the 14th, and remember the next day would have been Shavuot, the 15th day of the seventh, or I'm sorry, the 15th day of the third month. There we go. And it says, And he remained 7 days, if perchance he could see a vision as to whether he should remain or go down. And he celebrated the harvest festival of the first fruits with old grain. For in all the land of Canaan there was not a handful of seed. For the famine was over all the beasts and cattle and birds, and also over man. So you see, he celebrated the festival even when he couldn't do it the way it was prescribed, because he was using old grain. He had nothing else to offer in thanksgiving, but he did have this, and he was thankful, and he kept it to the best of his ability. And on the 16th, Yahuwah appeared to him and said to him, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, Here I am. And he said to him, I am Yahuwah Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham and Yitzchak. Fear not to go down into Mitzrayim, for I will make you, or make there, sorry, for I will there make of you a great nation. I will go down with you, and I will bring you up again. Which we see him talking to Moshe, saying, I am with you, I will go with you. It's the same wording there. And in this land shall you be buried, and Yahusuf shall put his hands upon your eyes. Fear not, go down into Mitzrayim. I was just reminded right now, you can say it was an epiphany, as they use that word of an inspiration from the Almighty where it's not of yourself. But when you read scripture and these things come to mind and you see these connections that just pop into your head that you've been looking at, those are inspired. It is of his Ruach, the word dwelling in you, making these things known to you, as he said. And it's explained very clearly by Kepha in the Recognitions. If you ever want to read about these things, I highly recommend that book. But I was just inclined to remember that he considered the land of the Yahuda at the time that he was dwelling there spiritual Egypt, if you will. Just as Moshe came to deliver the people physically from bondage in Egypt or Mitzrayim, Yahushua came to deliver them from spiritual bondage to sin and death from spiritual Mitzrayim, which was the land at that time. You find that alluded to in scripture as well. But here's another witness of that in the narrative with what was going on with Yaakov going into Egypt. So that's another way you can see how these parables play out and then their actual fulfillment. And his sons rose up, and his sons' sons, and they placed their father and their possessions upon wagons. And Yisrael rose up from the well of the oath, or Beersheba, on the 16th of this third month. And he went to the land of Egypt. And Yisrael sent Yahuda before him to his son Yahusuf to examine the land of Goshen. For Yahusuf had told his brothers that they should come and dwell there, that they might be near him. And this was the goodliest in the land of Mitzrayim, and near to him, for all are also for the cattle. We've talked about this before. This area on the western side of the Gihon here, or the Nile River, which this is also how Josephus describes these rivers flowing throughout the world that were around the Garden of Eden, which is also kind of how Yobelim describes the Garden of Eden being there, but that's not what relevant at the time. The land of Goshen was at the delta or on this area with the fords of the Nile. Pharaoh had built up these areas to have land masses between them that could be inhabited, and there was grass and fields for cattle. This was all shepherding land, which is why the Canaanites that were here taking over the land of Shem were the shepherd kings of Egypt that would come over and attack them. But eventually they were expelled again over 100 years before Jacob came into the land here. They were expelled out of the land when Abraham was still dwelling here, and there was no more room for Lot and him. Uh, just context, and that's the Philistines that came from Egypt, uh, some of the progenitors of them. But this land was for pastoral lands. It was not like what was over here that was desert and more arid, where there were no rains, if you will. It still rained on this area, which was what was mentioned in the other places, other histories. It specifically mentions that in Egypt there is no rain because Yahuwah created it in such a manner so that the land would not become cursed from the hot water falling from the Shamayim there. The waters flood from the Nile and irrigate the land of Egypt, which is explained as the providence of Yahuwah in the recognitions of Clement. All right, so back to what we're reading here. And that was the area that they're looking at in the land of Egypt. This isn't actually his territory. This was Shem's land, but Egypt had control of it, just like they'd had control in and out of the Sinai Peninsula for times because of its location. Sometimes they would have dominance, sometimes they would not. Sometimes at one point in modern Israel, they controlled this area and then they gave it up. But again, they're also not just like America, we're not being actively obedient to the common law. When you're in disobedience, you lose liberty. But right here, it says, "In Yisrael went, or sent Yahuda," we read that part, and it was good also for the cattle. And these are the names of the sons of Jacob who went into Egypt or Mizraim with Jacob their father. Reuben or Reuben, right? Behold the son, see the son, the firstborn of Israel. And these are the names of his sons, Hanok and Palu and Hezron and Carmi. 5. Shimon and his sons, and these are the names of his sons, Yamuel and Yamin and Ohad and Yachin and Zohar and Shaul, the son of the Zephasite woman, which would have been the Canaanite. She's specifically named as a Zephasite, though. 7. And remember, all of the children that would have come of this son would be outside of the covenant in the land that cannot dwell there. They would be cut off, just like all of the children from Salach of the sons of Yahuda, the ones that most likely were responsible for the rebellion against our Mashiach when he was in the land. The um, Anyone who intermarried with the Canaanites would have that same problem because it was appointed them for what they did with breaking the oath, just like the son of any of the children of Cain pre-flood. Not one of them survived the flood, just as none of these people will survive what they are doing. Just like no one that breaks an oath or does one of these things, none of their children will survive that as well. That is how the law functions. It's why we ourselves can repent of things if it's appointed, but we can also do things that cause our own children to not be able to have the truth, which is, it's a terrifying thing to think. It's a horrible thing to think of, but it is the reality that you can see in Scripture. He tells us these things so that we can know the truth and not fall after wrong examples. This is explained. It's explained best in the recognitions when it talks about how if you take such care in cultivating a field, how much more care should you take in cultivating your own soul before having children? And that is the example that you see in Abraham being in his state of repentance and walking right before the promised seed is born in Yitzhak. And then Yitzhak having his seed when he is not in rebellion, and the same with Jacob, but the problems that come from those, right? So we'll continue, but please just keep these things in mind as we read because it is there, it is life. It is how reality works. And it is the whole reason why he's put these things in his word for us to comprehend them. Louis and his sons, and these are the names of his sons, Gresham and Korach and Merari. 4. Yahuda and his sons, and these are the names of his sons, Selach and Perez and Zerah. 4. Yishakar and his sons, and these are the names of his sons, Tola and Phua and Yabsub and Shimron. 5. Zebulun and his sons, and these are the names of his sons, Sered and Elon and Yahliel. 4. And these are the sons of Jacob, and their sons whom Leah bore to Jacob in Mesopotamia, 6. And their one sister Dinah, and all the souls of the sons of Leah, and their sons who went with Jacob, their father, into Egypt, were 29, and Jacob their father being with them, they were 30. And the sons of Zilpah, Leah's handmaid, the wife of Jacob, who bore unto Jacob Gad and Asher, and there are the names of their sons who went with him into Mitzrayim. The sons of Gad, Ziphion, and Haggai, and Shuni. and Esbon, and Eri and Arieli and Arodi, 8. And remember, one of the meanings of Gad is a troop, and you can see that reflected in his name there. And the sons of Asher, Imnah and Ishvi, and Beriah, and Sariah, their one sister, like Sarah, sorry, 6. All the souls were 14, and all those of Leah were 44. And the sons of Rachel, or Rachel, the wife of Jacob, Yahusaph and Benjamin. And there were born to Yahusaph in Mitzrayim before his father came into Egypt, or Mitzrayim, those whom Asnath, daughter of Potiphar, Kohen of, or priest of Heliopolis, bare unto him, Manasseh and Ephraim, 3. And the sons of Benjamin, Bela and Becher, right, and Ashbel and Gerah and Naaman and Ehi and Rosh and Mupim and Hupim and Ared, 11. And remember, this is the son of my right hand, the one who is given the manifold blessing. That would be 13 total, not counting himself, or I'm sorry, not counting Rachel. So 12 for him, and then he would be like the 13th. A little microcosm of that inside that family itself, an echo within echoes, if you will. And that was typified with Benjamin here, but in Ephraim and Manasseh, you're given the birthright, which is the what was taken from Yahudah and given to the whole world at the coming of the good news being brought forth by Ephraim, Britain, and the commonwealth of nations there, the great nation and company of nations, and then Manasseh, the great nation that came up after them, right? So it says, and the sons of Bilhah, the handmaid of Rachel or Rachel, the wife of Jacob, whom she bare to Jacob, were Dan and Naphtali. And these are the names of their sons who went with them into Egypt, or Mizraim. And the sons of Dan were Hushim and Salmon, and Asudi, and Iyaka, and Shalomo, 6. And they died the year in which they entered into Egypt. And there was left to Dan Hushim alone. This is where you get the discrepancy in the numbers. When you look at different accounts, you'll see 70 or 75. But because these 5 died is the reason why you have the difference there. And remember, Dan was a type. We talked about that. It might have been last week, but I think it was before then. We went over it a little bit, and we will cover it in much more detail when we're reading through the accounts of what they're doing and when we read the fulfillment of these things and what they actually represent, like in the Trustees on Antichrist by Hippolytus. But that is in the renewed covenant times for well into the future from where we're at currently, which is during the first 40 days when Moshe was on the mountain of Sinai with Yahushua, speaking with him face to face and being given the book of Yobelim here and the common law. But here we go. It says, and they died, and he was left with Hushim alone. And these are the names of the sons of Naphtali, Yaziel, and Guni, and Yazir, and Shalom, and Eve, or Ive. And Ive, who was born after the years of famine, died in Egypt, or Mitzrayim. And all the souls of Rachel, or Rachel, were 26. And all the souls of Jacob which went into Mitzrayim were 70 souls. These are his children and his children's children, in all 70, but 5 died in Egypt before Yahusaph and had no children. And in the land of Canaan, two sons of Yahudah died, and Onan, and they had no children. And the children of Israel buried those who perished, meaning the sons of Yahudah and the five sons of Dan, and the one son here of Naphtali. They buried those who perished, and they were reckoned among the 70 Gentile nations. Notice 70 Gentile nations and then the 70 children, like an echo of that. Just like you had the 70 nations that were brought up at the Tower of Babel, and here's a representative of the nations in just his children, which is where we get the idea of that being a microcosm of the world in a larger scale. And that's how you can see that the events in the land here that we are going to read about in the future, Judges, Kings, and Chronicles, is like world events later on. And in the land of Canaan, oh, I'm sorry, I read that part. Chapter 45. Yisrael, or Israel, went into the land of Goshen. And Yisrael went into the country of Egypt, into the land of Goshen, on the new month of the fourth month, 2172 Anno Mundi, in the second year of the third week of the 45th Yobel. And Yahusuf went to meet his father Jacob, to the land of Goshen. And he fell on his father's neck and wept. And Yahusuf said, and Yisrael said to Yahusuf, now let me die, since I have seen you. And now may Yahuwah Elohim of Yisrael be Baruch, the Elohim of Abraham and the Elohim of Yitzhak, who has not withheld his mercy and his free unmerited pardon or favor from his servant Jacob. It is enough for me that I have seen your face while I am yet alive. Yes, true is the vision which I saw at Bethel, meaning when he was shown everything that would happen to him and his children. Right? Baruch be Yahuwah my Elohim forever and ever, and Baruch be his name, he who causes it to be. Right? And Yahusuf and his brothers ate bread before their father and drank wine. And Jacob rejoiced with exceeding great joy because he saw Yahusuf eating with his brothers and drinking before him. And he Baruch the Creator of all things, who had preserved him, and had preserved for him his 12 sons. And Yahusuf had given to his father and to his brothers as a gift the right of dwelling in the land of Goshen, in the Ramses and all the region round about. Now, it says Ramses here, but that was an acronym, I believe is what they call it. Just like something in England, they'd call the place York after it was previously known as something else, but they would call it York in their older histories as well, because that is what it is known as today. That's an anachronism. They did the same thing in the common scriptures when they're talking about how they built Ramses. It was never called Ramses at the time. It was called Avaris or Abaris, which is the city of the Hebrews, or the city of those who crossed over, if you will. But Avaris is also mentioned by the people from Patterns of Genesis. It's what they've done archaeology on, and it has evidence of the Exodus or the Hebrews being inhabiting in the land and their suffering persecution. But either way, it says they're dwelling in the land of Goshen and in Ramses or Avaris and all the region round about, which he ruled over before Pharaoh. And Israel and his sons dwelt in the land of Goshen, the best part of the land of Egypt. And Israel was 130 years old when he came into Egypt. And Yahusuf nourished his father and his brethren, and also their possessions, with bread as much as sufficed them for the 7 years of the famine. And now there's a lot involved here, but as Yahusuf was used and he had suffered afflictions and then was exalted, and as he was a type of our Mashiach in benefiting the world through his death and sufferings here, this is explained in the testaments of the 12 patriarchs. If you guys ever take the time to look at them or go over what we've already read of them on this channel, you'll see that very clearly. But as he was a type here, it's also reciprocation because Yahuwah is true and our Creator is trustworthy and he's not inconsistent, that a man will reap that which he sows. So as Yahusuf, when he came back and provided for his parents of his own substance every year of all the things that he could, he's likewise rather being nourished and all his substance is being taken care of as well, and in a greater in a more magnificent manner, because we cannot outgive our Maker. That's a true phenomenon of all of us, if we would only believe that. Another witness of this is when, I believe it's in the book of Ezra, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, he is rebuking them or getting after them for not bringing tithes into his storehouse, for not building up his house first and providing what they ought to, and then their own storehouses would be full. They wouldn't have famines and suffering, and they would be benefited with his gifts because they would be benefiting others and reap what they sow. It says, in the land of Mitzrayim suffered by reason of the famine, and Yahusuf acquired all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh in return for food. And he got possession of the people and their cattle and everything for Pharaoh. And while this was done then as a microcosm, the macrocosm is that for the last few centuries, very easily the last few centuries, we've had what Fourth Ezra describes as the heads of the eagle reigning and reinstituting all the evils of papal Rome that had been diminished since the wounding of that beast and the temporal power being taken out with Napoleon. It's being reinstated, it's been rebuilt covertly by means of the Jesuits. We've talked about these things, but this is how it's foretold that through Yahusuf, all land would be acquired for Pharaoh in return for food. And he also got possession of the people and their cattle and everything. Now, today, you can't do anything without a license or permission. Most people don't do anything without a license or permission, paying tithes to Rome for everything, including your right to work. When literally in the Constitution, our rights come from our Creator, and no one can make a law that turns your right into a privilege that you have to pay for. If they do that, that is a void law. There are now traitors, and anyone that participates is in conspiracy to commit treason. They're not lawfully doing anything, but because we don't know better and we're sinning against our Creator as a people, individually, and as a nation, just like the children in the time of Judges, where they had their enemies ruling over them, we have likewise been conquered. And their way of keeping us under their thumb is to keep us sinning and breaking the common law. Having Christmas as a national holiday, having Sunday laws that are enforced or enforceable, and other abominations will keep us under the thumb of Rome. And the more that we go licentious and do more evils, the more reprobate we become, the more under the other kingdom we become. And it's not pleasant. I don't know about you, but I don't enjoy not having the freedoms that our country is supposed to. And we can fix that by repenting. But right here is where this is foretold in the narrative, in the people, and what they walk out. But you can see it's an inversion. while Yahusuf himself was righteous and pious and looking to the expectation. Generally, the ones that are being led by the nose and used as dupes to put everything under the thumb of Rome have not been walking correctly. We've been blinded or we've forgotten where we come from. So there's an inversion there, but I'm hoping you can really see this. This is how reality is. I mean, everybody that looks into this can find the evidence for it. The idea of the birth certificates and the everyone with the Social Security becoming under, and this is all as you believe, let it be to you. They do things through legalese that isn't really lawful, but because people go along with it, it's allowed to happen, right? So in this instance, we have two kingdoms, and when we forego his kingdom, we get subjected to the other. That's just the way it works. Anyone can't, we can't predict or we can't change when we're alive or what's going on, but you can have true liberty if you walk in it in this country. I don't know too much about other places, but there's still hope for here as of right now. It's definitely not easy. It's definitely not for everyone. A lot of people they try and there's bad things that happen to them because they're not repenting of the things that they're doing offensive. So they're under the jurisdiction that allows that. I hope that starts to make sense to people. But right here, oh, excuse me, where were we? Here we go. And it says, "And the years of the famine were accomplished, and Yahusuf gave to the people in the land seed and food, that they might sow in the 8th year. For the river had overflowed all the land of Egypt. For in the 7 years of the famine it had overflowed, and had irrigated only a few places on the banks of the river." It has not in italics here. But now it overflowed, right? So to imply that before it didn't. And remember, we've talked about that just earlier. The way that Mitzrayim or Egypt is irrigated, or the way they receive waters, is by the floodings of the Nile, so that the inundations of it comes up from the Nile, floods the land, and then it drains away and it allows the crops to flourish. Otherwise, if it came from above because of the heat, it would cause more desolation than what is already in the area. And the Mitzrayites, or Egyptians, sowed the land, and it bore much corn that year. And this was the 1st year of the 4th week of the 45th Yobel, or 2178 AM. And Yahusuf took of the corn of the harvest of the 5th part for the king, and left 4 parts for them for food and for seed. And Yahusuf made it an ordinance in the land of Egypt until this day. And Yisrael lived in the land of Mitzrayim 17 years. And all the days which he lived were 3 Yobelim, 147 years. And he died in the 4th year of the 5th week of the 45th Yobel, or 2188. And his prayer was fulfilled where he was coming upon the days of his mother and in good health, right? So he said, "Let my days come on to the days of your years and let me be like you." And he'll count it as good. One thing I forgot to mention, or I didn't point out so clearly that I wanted to, is that you can see that this is a type and picture because of what Yahusuf did. As he gathered all these resources for Pharaoh, Britain and America have been used covertly throughout the world to regather all these things for Rome's use, putting central banks throughout the Middle East for the last 20 years with the crusade, the war on terror, as well as what was going on before then with the world wars and otherwise. But moving on. And Yisrael Baruch, or blessed his sons before he died, and told them everything that would befall them in the land of Mitzrayim. And he made known to them what would come upon them in the last days, and Baruch them and gave to Yahusuf two portions in the land, which we've already covered at the end of Bereshit, or the book of Genesis there. And he slept with his fathers and was buried in the double cave in the land of Canaan, near Abraham his father, in the grave which he dug for himself in the double cave in the land of Hebron. And he gave all his books and the books of his fathers to Louis, his son, that he might preserve them and renew them for his children unto this day. Preserve them, meaning keeping the writings, and renew them by making copies. It was given to Louis to do that. And from Louis, it went to Kohath, I believe we already covered the testament of Louis, the testament of Kohath, and the visions of Amram, where you see where these writings, what Abraham got from the writings of Noach and others that were preserved, in his writings that he wrote and copied, that he passed down, they were given to Louis. Louis gave them to Kohath. Kohath gave them to Amram, and Amram's family was Aharon and Moshe and Miriam, who would have been familiar with these writings. That's a little different context than what most of us might be familiar with. That's why they were responsible for teaching the children there and for what they were doing. And that is the context for unto this day, meaning unto the day when this was being given to, not even to our period now. Yaakov dies and the children of Yisrael multiply. Yobelim 46. And it came to pass that after Yaakov died, the children of Yisrael multiplied in the land of Egypt, and they became a great nation, and were of one accord in heart, so that brother loved brother, and every man helped his brother. So the one loving Elohim ought also to love his brother who is born of him. This is that very thing played out in the before times. And they increased abundantly and multiplied exceedingly 10 weeks of years. 2242 from 2178, or sorry, 2188. Okay. 10 weeks of years, or 70 years, all the days of the life of Yahusuf. And there was no Satan or adversary, nor any evil, all the days of the life of Yahusuf which he lived after his father Jacob. For all the Mitzrayites honored the children of Yisrael, sorry, all the days of the life of Yahusuf. Now that could be reminiscent of the possibly 70 years where after they were walking right, or after he had come, his body was walking right in obedience until there was schisms or problems within the body itself. I can't say for certain. There is no record of that. We do know that after he came, for 40 years, they were in the land there. When the time came that the Roman armies were surrounding them and then left, it gave them leave to leave that area, and they went to Petra, where they were known as the Nazarene, that were there for a while before they were persecuted and wiped out of existence. Whether or not there was any schism that was brought in then or something of that nature, I cannot speak of it. I don't know. But these patterns and these things are not written for no reason. So it says, and Yahusuf died being 110 years old. 17 years he lived in the land of Canaan. And 10 years he was a servant, and 3 years in prison, and 80 years he was under the king, ruling all the land of Egypt, with 70 years with them in the land with him. Whether it was 80, that might be off, but I remember it was 70 total that they were with him in the land that he was while he was second to Pharaoh. And he died, and all his brethren, and all that generation. And he commanded the children of Israel before he died that they should carry his bones with them when they went forth from the land of Egypt. And he made them swear regarding his bones, for he knew that the Egyptians would not again bring forth and bury him in the land of Canaan, like they did Jacob, and they allowed their forefathers at a time. For Macamaron, king of Canaan, while dwelling in the land of Assyria, fought in the valley of the king, or fought in the valley with the king of Mitzrayim, and slew him there, and pursued after the Egyptians to the gates of Ermon. But he was not able to enter, for another, a new king, had become king of Egypt, and he was stronger than he, and he returned to the land of Canaan. And the gates of Mitzrayim were closed, and none went out, and none came into Egypt. And Jehoshaphat died in the 46th Yobel, in the 6th week, in the 2nd year, and they buried him in the land of Mitzrayim, and all his brethren died after him. And it says he was buried 22:42 a.m. And the king of Egypt went forth to war with the king of Canaan, 22:63. And we've read over this before, in particular, when we were going over the testaments of the 12 patriarchs. There's a little bit of discrepancy with some of the dates on when some of them, like Gad and Benjamin, had died and were buried specifically because it was 5 years after this war that they went up secretly, and there was some time where they were buried, or they were sneaking them out, and then they could not go anymore. And that's when Amram was stuck in the land of Canaan for 40 years, separated from his wife when he stayed true to her, never remarried or anything while separated. And it wasn't until after he came back that he had his children, which we're about to cover a little bit right here. And the king of Egypt went to war with the king of Canaan, 22:63, in the 47th Yobel, in the 2nd week, in the 2nd year. And the children of Israel brought forth all the bones of the children of Jacob, save the bones of Jehoshaphat. And they buried them in the field, in the double cave, in the mountain. Now, this right here is quoted, or the fact that all of the forefathers were buried except for Jehoshaphat in the land or in the double cave of Machpelah. That's quoted in Acts, but you won't find it referenced anywhere but right here in the book of Yobelim. In the Bereshit, it only mentions Jacob or Yisrael being buried in the land. So this is another proof of the legitimacy of the scriptures, or this book being scripture. And the most returned to Mitzrayim, or Egypt, but a few of them remained in the mountains of Hebron, and Amram, your father, remained with them. And the king of Canaan was victorious over the king of Mitzrayim, and he closed the gates of Egypt. And he, the king of Canaan, that became the ruler of Egypt, okay? Remember, the Canaanites were the ones that were now the puppets of Satan, if you will. Breaking the oath, they put themselves under the curse to be having a death sentence. His ruach would no longer abide in any of the Canaanim, and it is Satan who and his demons who have full jurisdiction. And this is what they choose to do because Satan, if you remember, wants to thwart the promises, to stop the fulfillment of the word, to do everything he can to muck things up. And when you keep that in mind, all of these things make sense because they're the promised seed, the plant of righteousness that he's trying to keep from going into the land. All right. And the king of Canaan was victorious over the king of Mitzrayim, and he closed the gates of Egypt. And he devised an evil device, right? The devices of men. He devised an evil device against the children of Israel of afflicting them. And he said to the people of Egypt, behold, the people of the children of Israel have increased and multiplied more than we. Come and let us deal intelligently or cleverly with them before they become too many. Let us afflict them with slavery before war come upon us, and before they too fight against us. Else they will join themselves unto our enemies, and get them up out of our land. For their hearts and faces are towards the land of Canaan. And he set over them taskmasters to afflict them with slavery. And they built strong cities for Pharaoh, Pithom, and Ramses, and they built all the walls and all the fortifications which had fallen in the cities of Egypt. And they made them serve with rigor, and the more they dealt evilly with them, the more they increased and multiplied. And the people of Mitzrayim abominated the children of Yisrael. So, God willing, you can see how these things have been playing out. Now, you'll see that our ultimate deliverance and being brought back into the land is culminated in this, and we've talked about it before, but in this book, we see a whole picture in parables of the truth from the beginning until the new creation. Not everything is plainly written, though, but these are the types and pictures that you're supposed to be able to see through that. And Og willing, you can. So 47, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, or Mitzrayim, kills all male babies born. And in the ancient history of Caledonia, this is about when that book began. So it takes place from around 2303 from creation until 1290 AD with the death of the Maiden of Norway. And in there, it mentions how Pharaoh, the Canaanite here that took over, demanded of the people that they worship the bull or Apis, and if they didn't worship, he was going to bring their children into slavery through taxation. Many of the people capitulated, but the righteous remnant that did not want to do mixtures refused, and they left and were protected. And that is what the ancient history of Caledonia records was their history. What happened to them after they left? They became Trojans, went from Troy to an island, possibly Crete or Cyprus. Then from there, they went to Sicily near Mount Etna, the volcano. And from there, they went to Gaul. And from Gaul, they went to Montrose. It was called Mantrojan at the time. The Mantrojan, specifically the Red Hill or Red Hand Hill, where a foretelling about their leader and how the Red Hand, the line of Zerah, was culminated in their Daniel or Donald, the MacDonald line being the line of kings. Uh, they got the emblem of the red hand by the foretelling that was mentioned that his blood and flesh would touch the ground before, or his blood would touch the ground before any soles of the feet of men would. And when they were looking for their promised land, when they were in ships waiting for the fog to clear, the son of Louis, who was Cohen over them, mentioned that whoever got to the land first of the two would be their king, or would be their ruler, their prince, if you will. They didn't have kings yet. And as it cleared, they were both contesting and striving to get there. McIntyre, the shipwright, was closer to hand at reaching the shore. So Donald, seeing that, knowing that the foretelling and his approval had already been foreordained, he chopped off his left hand with an axe, took it up with his other hand, and threw it onto the shore, and then swore that the fulfillment of the prophecy about his blood touching the shore was now done, and he's their rightful prince. The other men and all the people witnessed that the foretelling of Lazarus the sixth was true, and he is the rightful prince. And that was the actual beginning of that schism with the McIntyre family leaving um, for a while after they went into the land there. But all of this happened around this time when they first left Egypt. And that is also real history. I encourage you all to read that if you want. I'll try to put a link in the description of this video for the PDF for that book. And if you have any family, if you have any relations that were Highlanders or Scottish, it could be your direct family history. I know my grandfather who lives with me is a Donaldson, the MacDonald line specifically, but when they came to America, for reasons that we might talk about later, a lot of the Celts or the Highlanders of Scotland in America changed their names that sounded overtly Gaelic because of the stigma of Catholics at the time or what was being done. But that's neither here nor there at the moment. It says Pharaoh kills, king of Egypt kills all male babies born. And in the seventh week, in the seventh year, in the 47th Yobel, your father went forth 23:03 a.m. from the land of Canaan, and you were born in the fourth week, in the sixth year thereof, in the 48th Yobel. This was the time of tribulation on the children of Israel. Think about the times of tribulation, okay? Moshe was born in the midst of it, and right at the beginning, he was in the 7 months of, as you will read right here, for 7 months they cast him in, and he was hidden for three. So 4 months in was when he was born, he was hidden for three, and then they stopped. But in that time, you can see here, they would have killed 1,000 male children. And that was reciprocated. It's mentioned in here, and it's mentioned in the wisdom of Shlomo or Solomon, Chokmah Shlomo, that for the 1,000 children, 1,000,000 men of the Egyptian armies were slain. 1,000 men for every child. And think about that in relation to how Pharaoh treated his children and how Pharaoh's children or the nation of Egypt was reciprocated in like they did, and so they reaped what they sowed. This is in the seventh week, in the seventh year, in the 47th Yobel. I read this part. Sorry about that. And Pharaoh, king of Mitzrayim, issued a command regarding them that they should cast all their male children which were born into the river. And they cast them in for 7 months until the day that you were born, and your mother hid you for 3 months. And they told regarding her. And she made an ark for you, and covered it with pitch and asphalt, and placed it in the flags on the bank of the river. And she placed you in it 7 days. And your mother came by night and suckled you, and by day Miriam, your sister, guarded you from the birds. Parables, think about it, okay? And in those days, Tharmuth, the daughter of Pharaoh, came to bathe in the river, and she heard your crying, and she told her maidens to bring you forth, and they brought you unto her. And she took you out of the ark, and she had compassion on you. And your sister said to her, shall I go and call unto you one of the Hebrew women to nurse and suckle this babe for you? And she said, go. And she went and called your mother, Jochebed. Jochebed was the daughter of Louis, who was the same age as Amram and the one who married him, his aunt. But this was before the Torah was given, that is not prohibited. And before, when there is no Torah, there is no sin. This is one of those examples of that. Um, Louis had married into the family as an echo of the other forefathers, and then likewise it was shown right here with his own children. But while in the land there, you can see there's a little bit of things that we would consider not something to do now. Okay? And she gave her wages and she nursed you. And afterward, when you were grown up, they brought you unto the daughter of Pharaoh, and you did become her son. And Amram your father taught you writing. And after you had completed 3 weeks, they brought, so when he was 20, right? They brought you into the royal court. And you were 3 weeks of years at court until the time when you did go forth from the court, the royal court, and did see an Egyptian smiting your friend, who was of the children of Israel. And you did slay him, and hid him in the sand. And that was in 2372 AM. And on the second day you did, and two, and on the second day you did, and two of the children of Israel, meaning he went out again, and two of the children of Israel striving together, and you did say to him, who was doing the wrong, why do you smite your brother? And he was angry and indignant, and said, who made you a prince and a judge over us? Thank you to kill me as you killed the Egyptian yesterday. And you did fear and flee on account of these words. Chapter 48. Moshe returns from Midian to Mitzrayim, or Egypt. Now, think about this. When he first was recognizing that he would be a deliverer of the people, he rescued a man. The people were indignant and angry. They did not want him to reign or rule over them. And he went away for a time, and they had to suffer for 40 years. Think about that. What if this man had accepted, if they had stopped fighting and made reconciliation? What if the people had been worthy of it then? Would they have been delivered then? Now, we think of things like worthy and unworthy, and none of us are worthy of deliverance. We've all fallen short of eternal life. None of us are worthy. It is at the complete works of Yahushua and belief in those alone that we are delivered from the destruction and wrath to come. We don't do his word or keep the instructions to deliver us. We do them because we love him. We follow him because we want to obey him, because we believe him and we love him. It's the thing he told us to do if that was the condition. So if you don't love the truth, you have no obligation to obey him. But if you profess that you do love the truth, it is an obligation to at least do the thing that he said. So right here, it says, and in the 6th year of the 3rd week of the 49th Yobel, you did depart and dwell in the land of Midian, 2372 AM, 5 weeks and 1 year. And you did return into Egypt, or Mitzrayim, in the 2nd week in the 2nd year, in the 50th Yobel. And you yourself know what he spoke to you on Mount Sinai, and what Prince Mastema desired to do with you when you were returning into Egypt. Did he not with all his power seek to slay you and deliver the Mitzrites, or Egyptians, out of your hand, when he saw that you were sent to execute judgment and vengeance on the Egyptians? Remember, he was almost slain because his children were not circumcised in the way properly, as a type of our Mashiach being slain for our uncircumcision of heart. It's the reason why he's had to die for our transgression of his law to bring us back under the fold. Never really saw it that clearly there. And I delivered you out of his hand. And it's a covenant of blood that when she cut the foreskin, Zipporah mentions that this is a covenant of blood between me and you, she says to Moshe, who is the one like unto our Mashiach in all things. This is, and I delivered you out of his hand, and you did perform the signs and wonders, the messenger speaking to him, right? I delivered you out of his hand, and you did perform the signs and wonders which you were sent to perform in Mitzrayim against Pharaoh, and against all his house, and against his servants, and his people. And Yahuwah executed a great vengeance on them for Yisrael's sake, and smote them through blood and frogs, lice and dog flies, and malignant boils breaking forth in blains, and their cattle by death and by hailstones, whereby he destroyed everything that grew for them, and by locusts, which devoured the residue which had been left by the hail, and by darkness, and of the firstborn of men and animals. And on all their idols Yahuwah took vengeance and burned them with fire. Now, this might seem extreme, and you'd wonder, why would he do this to the children or the Egyptians, but to no one else, right? But think about it in context of what we just said earlier, where the people in the land were like spiritual Egypt. And when he came and they rejected the truth, they got fire and sword by Rome, and the temple was destroyed in 70 AD. The city, the whole place was burned to the ground, and it was destroyed. Not one stone was left upon another. In the same way here, when the children came in, Jacob was greeted. They were greeted as friends, gifted. Yahusuf, who had been mistreated and came through into an exalted state and had done nothing but benefit Pharaoh, was benefited and was reciprocated, and they had mutual agreements and covenants. They had friendships, and then friends turned against friends and did evil. So they were at the state where they should have known better. They had seen these providences of Yahuwah. They had been helped through the famine, where while the whole world suffered, they did not. Although they did lose their freedom and they were idolaters. So there's also part of that. But while they were not suffering, the world was. And when they were mistreating his own, then he brought them through the suffering of these things in restitution, both rebuking them for their idols and making sure that they suffered the things that the whole world did when they didn't. Although this is in a miraculous way, and to teach them, it was to correct them and get them to repent. As you see when we read the account earlier, or as we'll read it, the children leave with a mixed multitude. It's a mixed multitude of people, not just the bloodline descendants of Abraham that became the children in the land and part of the covenant. And that's always been true. But it says, by darkness and by death of the firstborn and of men and animals, right? He destroyed them. And on all their idols, Yahuwah took vengeance and burned them with fire. And everything was sent through your hand, that you should declare before they were done. And you did speak with the king of Egypt. And we read over that as well. If you remember, we read through the extended version, if you will, or the unedited version that is missing from the Masoretic text, where the redundant parts are repeated. Yahuwah says to do it, and he went and did exactly what it was told, and then the thing happened over and over and over again. And everything took place according to your words. 10 great and terrible judgments came on the land of Mitzrayim, that you might execute vengeance on it for Yisrael. And Yahuwah did everything for Yisrael's sake, and according to his covenant which he had ordained with Abraham, that he would take vengeance on them, as they had brought them by force into bondage. The promise he had made 430 years later, from the time where he said, "Know for certain that your children shall be afflicted and mistreated, and then taken into captivity in a land not their own. And the ones whom he take them into bondage, I shall recompense or requite." That is the ones that he promised and ordained through Abraham that he would take vengeance for what they had done, foreknowing and assuring him. And the prince Mastema stood up against you and sought to cast you into the hands of Pharaoh, and he helped the Egyptian sorcerers. And they stood up and wrought before you the evils indeed we permitted them to work. But the remedies we did not allow to be wrought by their hands. And Yahuwah smote them with malignant ulcers, and they were not able to stand. For we destroyed them so that they could not perform a single sign. Eventually they got so bad they said, "This is the finger of Elohim," and they could not contest with Moshe. They fully witnessed to Pharaoh, but in his hardened heart he still would not repent, if you recall. And notwithstanding all signs and wonders, that Prince Mastema was not put to shame, because he took courage and cried to the Egyptians to pursue after you with all the powers of the Egyptians, or Mitzraites, with their chariots and with their horses, and with all the hosts of the peoples of Egypt. And I stood between the Egyptians and Yisrael, and we delivered Yisrael out of his hand, and out of the hand of his people, and Yahuwah brought them through the midst of the sea, as it were dry land. Now, if Mashiach is the one speaking, and it was the Father through him doing all things, because that's the way it's been from the beginning, then Yahuwah is the one that delivered him, even though he's the one that stood there, and they're both the we being spoken of. Ab willing, Father willing, that's making sense to you all. And all the peoples whom he brought to pursue Yisrael, or Israel, Yahuwah our Elohim cast them into the midst of the sea, into the depths of the abyss, beneath the sea, or beneath the children of Yisrael, even as the people of Mitzrayim had cast their children into the river. He took vengeance on 1,000,000 of them, and 1,000 strong and energetic men were destroyed on account of one suckling of the children of your people, which they had thrown into the river. And on the 14th day, and on the 15th, and on the 16th, and on the 17th, and on the 18th, the prince Mastema, which means hater or reviler, right, was bound and imprisoned behind the children of Yisrael, that he might not accuse them. So he was bound on the Pesach through the 18th, while they were traveling and before they were being chased. And then they were chased up until, what was it, the 20 or the 21st? That's when they caught up to him after 3 days, and then you had the Red Sea crossing on that Shabbat, right? And on the 19th, we let them loose that they might help the Egyptians and pursue the children of Israel. And he hardened their hearts and made them stubborn. And the device was devised by Yahuwah our Elohim, that he might smite the Egyptians and cast them into the sea, which is where it says that he takes Leviathan, puts a hook or ring in his nose, her nose, and leads her wherever he will. Is nothing but a beast under control. And on the 14th we bound him, that he might not accuse the children of Israel on the day when they asked the Mitzraites for vessels and garments, vessels of silver, and vessels of gold, and vessels of bronze, in order to despoil the Mitzrayites in return for the bondage in which they had forced them to serve. So all that plunder was restitution for their servitude. And we did not lead forth the children of Israel from Egypt empty-handed. Remember the commandment of the Passover. Remember the commandment which Yahuwah commanded you concerning the Passover, that you should celebrate it in its season on the 14th of the first month. Think about this. Remember, it's foretelling exactly what would happen to our Mashiach, when and where. And the reason he wanted them to be there was to be witnesses so that they can come to the belief. That you should kill it before it is evening, and that they should eat it by night on the evening of it should say 14th. We know that the 15th doesn't start until the sun is up, right? From the time of the setting of the sun. For on this point, or for on this night, rather, the beginning of the festival and the beginning of the joy, you were eating the Pesach in Mitzrayim, when all the powers of Mastema had been let loose to slay all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh to the firstborn of the captive maidservant in the mill, and to the cattle. So you see, it was Satan and his demons or his minions that did the murders or killings of people here. It was not Yahuwah. Yahuwah allowed it because if Satan got his desire, he would destroy all men. This is what he does to his own. He takes them to destroy them. But some he will toy with like a cat does with a mouse beforehand. These are the ones that he gives trinkets to in this world for, parlor tricks and pretend power for them to do his will. In the end, though, it doesn't go over well. It says, and this is the sign which Yahuwah gave them. Into every house on the lintels of which they saw the blood of the lamb of the first year, into that house they should not enter to slay, but should pass by it, that all those should be saved that were in the house, because the sign of the blood was on its lintels. And the powers of Yahuwah did everything according as Yahuwah commanded them, and they passed by all the children of Israel. Okay, sorry about that. So it says, for on this night, the beginning of the festival and the beginning of the joy, you were eating the Pesach in Mitzrayim, when all the powers of Mastema had been let loose to slay all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh to the firstborn of the captive maidservant in the mill, and to the cattle. Excuse me. And this is the sign which Yahuwah gave them. Into every house on the lintels of which they saw the blood of the lamb of the first year, into that house they should not enter to slay, but should pass by it, or pass over it, Pesach, that all those should be delivered that were in the house, because the sign of the blood was on the lintels, or the door posts, right? And the powers of Yahuwah did everything according as Yahuwah commanded them. Like he couldn't go beyond what he was given. And they passed by all the children of Israel, and the plague came not upon them to destroy them from amongst any soul, either of cattle, or man, or dog. And the plague was very grievous in Egypt, and there was no house in Mitzrayim where there was not one dead, and weeping and lamentation. And all Yisrael was eating the flesh of the Pesach, or the paschal lamb, and drinking the wine, and was lauding and baraking and giving thanks to Yahuwah Elohim of their fathers, and was ready to go forth from under the yoke of Mitzrayim, and from the evil bondage. So while all the land of Egypt mourned, the children rejoiced. This is inversion from what's enjoined when they're in the land, and they're to mourn or to eat things in bondage quickly, bitter herbs. And this is an inversion, sorry, from what we are to do now, where while they are eating and rejoicing, we are to mourn during this time. And it's specifically enjoined that those of the bridegroom fast when the bridegroom is taken from them, which we've covered not too long ago, and we've gone it over a few times. It's in the apostolic constitutions and applicable for everyone that wants to be a partaker of the renewed covenant. It says, "And remember you this day all the days of your life, and observe it from year to year, all the days of your life, once a year on its day, according to all the Torah thereof. And do not adjourn it from day to day, or from month to month. For it is an eternal ordinance, and engraved on the Shamayim tablets regarding all the children of Israel, that they should observe it every year on its day, once a year, throughout all their generations. And there is no limit of days, for this is ordained forever. The keeping of it is eternal. How it is kept has changed in the course of time, according to what he says. In the same way as the dietary instructions have changed over time, and the circumcision, it's no longer necessarily physical at this time, and it's for the same reasons. It's because his injunctions have been given at different times for different purposes. So I want everyone to carefully, prayerfully consider these things. It mentions in the Dead Sea Scrolls that everyone who is intelligent will studiously go through all of the laws and find out what are still applicable for them in their day. And the circumcision at this time is something that is not. It's directly mentioned in what we call the Bible. If you are to circumcise, you've severed yourself from Mashiach. You are a debtor to do the entire Torah, of which animal blood offerings are a requirement you cannot do. You will be under a curse, and along with those that rejected him, suffering the same problems. That's why we're not supposed to do that. That was literally what's right there in the Bible. There's really no excuse for going beyond that other than willful disobedience to the truth presented. It was foretold in 4th Ezra that he was taking away circumcisions. And again, it was foretold in the book of Yahushua, with Yahushua being the one that circumcised the children that were in the wilderness that did not get circumcised at that time. So I'm mentioning all these things because it's conditions that we ourselves are having to live through, and we're trying to figure things out. This is a serious matter. I've seen people have suffering because of these choices, and I try to help you, at least point you to what his word says about it. If anyone has anything different about renewed covenant writings that require circumcision, please share. But it's the circumcision of the heart that we have to do now. And on the eighth day, prophetically, everyone will be made like the messengers. There will be no more uncircumcision of flesh either at that time. It says, "And the man who is free from uncleanness and does not come to observe it on occasion of its days, so as to bring an acceptable offering before Yahuwah, and to eat and to drink before Yahuwah on the day of its festival, that man who is clean and close at hand shall be cut off, because he offered not the oblation of Yahuwah in its appointed season. He shall take the guilt upon himself. Let the children of Yisrael come and observe the Pesach on the day of its fixed time, on the 14th day of the first month, between the evenings, from the third part of the day to the third part of the night. For 2 portions of the day are given to the light, and a third part to the evening." So from the sunrise to the third hour, and from the third hour to the sixth hour, Or I'm sorry, that's not from the third hour and then the sixth hour to the ninth. You'd have the light portions here, the two parts. I don't quite get that one. But evening starts from the ninth hour to what we would call last light. It goes through sunset and it goes to the end of the mixture of light when complete darkness from the night has set in. It is not absolute darkness because you have the luminaries, whatever the moon phase might be at the time, as well as the stars and cloud condition. You have ambient light, so it's not absolute dark. But when the sun, the light from the sun is no longer, when that period is the end of the evening, that is the mixture of the light from the day. We've covered that part before, but here it's being very specific about what that evening is in which it's supposed to be eaten or cooked and then eaten. This is that which Yahuwah commanded you that you should observe it between the evenings from the ninth hour to last light. And it is not permissible to slay it during any period of the light, but during the period bordering on the evening, which is at the ninth hour when he gave up his ruach, foretelling exactly when these things would be. And let them eat it at the time of the evening until the third part of the night, and whatever is left over of all its flesh from the third part of the night and onwards, let them burn it with fire. And they shall not cook it with water, nor shall they eat it raw, but roasted on the fire. They shall eat it with diligence, its head with its inwards thereof, and its feet they shall roast with fire, and not break any bone thereof. For of the children of Yisrael no bone shall be crushed. And here is an allusion with the lamb and the people themselves as the body of Mashiach, collectively having no bone crushed, where it was typified in him as well. For this reason, Yahuwah commanded the children of Yisrael to observe the Passover on the day of its fixed time, and they shall not break a bone thereof, for it is a festival day, and a day commanded, and not and there may be no passing over from day to day and month to month, but on the day of its festival let it be observed. So, no changing the calendar from one day or adding intercalary days or weeks or months or anything, because you don't change the appointed fixed time. And do you command the children of Israel to observe the Passover throughout their days, every year, once a year, on the day of its fixed time? And it shall come for a memorial, well pleasing before Yahuwah, and no plague shall come upon them to slay them, or to smite them, in that year in which they celebrate the Pesach in its season, in every respect according to his command. That's the law. This is something that we can all look in our lives and see. If we have no plague, if we don't have any sickness in our body, if we don't have what they call the flu, the seasonal whatevers, it's because we are, to the best of our ability as we comprehend it, doing these things. That's the only guarantee on which you won't have these diseases, is through obedience, right? And specifically, not through dietary obedience here. It's not through exercise or anything like that. It's from keeping his feasts. It is a absolutely supernatural thing. It is no different than the manna rotting one day and not the next because he willed it alone. That's how reality works. People just don't get that so well. But this is how this works, and I can attest to this being true from my own life. We have not kept it perfectly. If you followed along, we've just had revelations about how to properly keep this every year since we've been doing it. But as we comprehend in obedience to what is written, we are doing. And that simple obedience Childlike, simple obedience to the truth, not arguing, not contriving things to make it different. That simple obedience is what brings the benefit. It says, and they shall not eat it outside the sanctuary of Yahuwah, but before the sanctuary of Yahuwah, and all the people of the congregation of Yisrael shall celebrate it in its appointed season. And every man who has come upon its day shall eat it in the sanctuary of your Elohim before Yahuwah from 20 years old and upward. For thus it is written and ordained that they should eat it in the sanctuary of Yahuwah. And when the children of Israel come into the land which they are to possess, into the land of Canaan, and set up the tabernacle of Yahuwah in the midst of the land in one of their tribes, until the sanctuary of Yahuwah has been built in the land, let them come and celebrate the Pesach in the midst of the tabernacle of Yahuwah. And let them slay it before Yahuwah from year to year. And in the days when the house has been built in the name of Yahuwah in the land of their inheritance, they shall go there and slay the Passover in the evening at sunset at the third part of the day. And they shall offer its blood on the threshold of the altar, and shall place its fat on the fire which is upon the altar. And they shall eat its flesh roasted with fire in the court of the house which has been set apart in the name of Yahuwah. And this is also why it was from the third hour, the ninth hour, if you will, until last light, all of the evening portion that they could do this, or even they said the third part of the night, right? It's because there's many people keeping the Pesach, and they all had to eat it before him. It wasn't done all at the same time. It took time to do that. And they shall eat its flesh roasted with fire in the court of the house which has been set apart in the name of Yahuwah. And they may not celebrate the Pesach in their cities, nor in any place save before the tabernacle of Yahuwah, or before his house where his name has dwelt, because he wanted them there. We've talked about that. And that is directly mentioned in the recognitions of Clement. It was appointed for that purpose and no other, that they would be there when his passion happened. And do you, Moshe, command the children of Israel to observe the ordinances of the Pesach, as it has or as it was commanded to you, declare you unto them every year, and the days of its days, and the festival of unleavened bread, that they should eat unleavened bread 7 days, and that they should observe its festival, and that they bring an oblation every day during those 7 days of joy before Yahuwah on the altar of Yahuwah your Elohim. For you celebrated this festival with haste when you went forth from Mitzrayim, till you entered into the wilderness of Shur. For on the shore of the sea you completed it, meaning with the Red Sea crossing there, the festival of the 7 days. That's why I mentioned to you they had that at the 21st of the month, the end of unleavened bread, and it was not at first fruits. First fruits would have been a different event in the course of their wandering after the Red Sea crossing. All right, and here's the last chapter of Yobelim before we'll finish up with this book, and next week we'll be reading, continuing with Shemot in the Exodus. So chapter 50, remember the Sabbaths. And after this Torah I made known to you the days of the Sabbaths in the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, when they kept the Sabbaths by the manna. Okay? And I told you of the Sabbaths of the land on Mount Sinai, and I told you of the Yobelim years in the Sabbaths of years, But the year thereof have I not told you till you enter the land which you are to possess. And the land also shall keep its Sabbaths while they dwell upon it, and they shall know the Yobel year. Wherefore I have ordained for you the year weeks and the years of the Yobelim. There are 49 Yobelim from the days of Adam until this day, 2410 years anno mundi, and 1 week and 2 years, and there are yet 40 years to come, literally distant, for the learning the commandments of Yahuwah until they pass over into the land of Canaan, crossing the Yarden to the west. So they didn't go over until 2450 or the 50th Yobel, which is still in the midst of the third day of creation. And he came, anyways, we'll get into that. We'll do that later. And the Yobelim shall pass by until Yisrael is cleansed from all guilt of fornication and uncleanness and pollution and sin and error, and dwells with confidence in all the land. And there shall be no more Satan or adversary or any evil one, and the land shall be clean from that time forevermore. Sorry. And behold, the commandment regarding the Sabbaths, I have written them down for you, and all the judgments of its laws. 6 days shall you labor, but on the seventh day is the Shabbat of Yahuwah your Elohim. In it you shall do no manner of work, you and your sons and your men servants and your maid servants, and all your cattle, and the sojourner also who is with you. And the man that does any work on it shall die. Whoever desecrates that day, whoever lies with his wife, because we're going to be made like the messengers, and spilling your seed makes you unclean during the day. You can't be unclean in his presence. Or whoever says he will do something on it, that he will set out on a journey thereon in regard to any buying or selling. And we don't see it so clearly here, but in the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Temple Scroll, and it's alluded to by Dawid in Yerushalayim before it was taken over by the pagans. It was a Kodesh city. No man could be unclean and enter it. No dogs were allowed in, no chickens were allowed in because we didn't want it defiled or anything. They didn't want them, uh, the chickens pooping on the ground all over, and they didn't want the dogs eating things that were set apart. But any man coming into the land had to be ritually clean, if you will. So you could not literally lay with your wife while observing the festivals or keeping the Sabbath there. But it says, and whoever draws water thereon, which he had not prepared for himself on the sixth day, and whoever takes up any burden to carry it out of his tent or out of his house, shall die. You shall do no work whatever on the Sabbath day, save what you have prepared for yourselves on the sixth day, so as to eat and drink and rest. It says, cook, store up for yourselves, and then rejoice in the Exodus, right? And that's what we're supposed to do now. It's a tradition of the Yahudim even today, although we don't subscribe to the Sabbath starting at the sunset of the night before. It starts with the day. And that's what Scripture says clearly. But, anyways, it's on the sixth day, so as to eat and drink and rest and keep Shabbat from all work on that day, and to Barak Yahuwah your Elohim, who has given you a day of festival and a Kodesh day, and a day of the Kodesh kingdom for all Yisrael, is this day among their days forever. The most set apart, the most important rehearsal day is the weekly seventh day Sabbath. For great is the honor which Yahuwah has given to Yisrael, that they should eat and drink and be satisfied on this festival day, and rest thereon from all labor which belongs to the labor of the children of men, save burning frankincense and bringing oblations and sacrifices before Yahuwah for days and for Sabbaths. This work alone shall be done on the Sabbath days in the sanctuary of Yahuwah your Elohim, that they may atone for Yisrael with sacrifice continually from day to day, for a memorial well pleasing before Yahuwah, and that he may receive them always from day to day according as you have been commanded. And every man who does any work thereon, or goes a journey, or tills farm, whether in his house or in any other place, or whoever lights a fire, or rides on any beast, or travels by ship on the sea, or whoever strikes or kills anything, or slaughters a beast or a bird, or whoever catches an animal or a fish, or a bird or a fish, or whoever fasts or makes war on the Sabbath, the man who does any of these things on the Shabbat shall die. Now, it was because of this injunction that over 1,000 people were martyrs during the times of the Maccabees. And it was after 1,000 of them were killed off that they said, if we keep doing that, we're going to be wiped out completely. And they made an injunction that they are permitted to defend and preserve their lives, but not attack. They cannot be aggressors on the Shabbat. And that was attributed as a righteous act. It was not held against them. They were providentially helped through what they did. As it is written in the tablets which he gave into the hands, or my hands, that I should write out for you the laws of the seasons, and the seasons according to the divisions of their days. Herewith is completed the account of the division of the days. Meaning the account that I, the one who is speaking, was supposed to write, which I believe is our Mashiach, and he only does what he sees, and he only says what he hears. So when he was enjoined to write it, he enjoins Moshe to write as well, as a type of the things, so that people can start to learn the truth in these patterns, right? Bullying that was edifying for you all and very, very educational. It goes right in line with what we are covering, and it should help us as we get back to the scriptures, in particular the Septuagint version of the rest of the account of Exodus. You should be able to see how this was knowledge that Moshe had that others were not so privy to. But it's in his disposition and behavior that he does such things. So thank you all for your time. You have a wonderful Shabbat, a great Shavua Tov, and we will speak to you next time. Shalom.